I guess we'll call it a lunch and learn. Some of us, it might be a little bit of a late lunch if you're on the East Coast. Today we're going to be going over Management Reporter. And Ashley, did you get the polling questions? Do we have the opportunity to maybe put some polling questions out to kind of start off? Or do we not have those? We can skip them if we don't have those.
Yep, so I think if you just click on select a poll on the right, you can, on the control panel.
Well, last time somebody else did put them in control though, so if we don't have that, that's fine because I didn't put any in. So, all right, well, we'll just get started with the polling or with our slideshow, and let's see. Hang on a second here. Get this out of the way. All right. The first thing we're gonna let me at least explain who I am. I am, like Ashley said, one of the GP implementation consultants here at Interline BMI. I've got 20 plus years experience with FRX and Management Reporter and doing report writing with that particular product. And I've been with Interline/Columbus for the past 14 years, and I actually do specialize in doing financial reporting, support, and training around those products. We are expanding our reporting offering as well so that it doesn't just include Management Reporter, but for the past couple of years, that is what I have been focusing on. And today's agenda is going to be what is Management Reporter and what kind of solution is the Management Reporter. We'll go through a product overview, and then at the end we'll deal with some question and answers if anybody has anything. All right, so what is Management Reporter? Well, it's a real-time financial reporting application for creating, generating, securing, and publishing your financial statements, such as your profit and loss, your balance sheets. You can do actual versus budget. You can do expense analysis type reports. Anything that essentially that you can get from a trial balance, you can do out of Management Reporter. You can make these board quality reports without the assistance of your IT staff. This was really meant to be an accountant's tool. You didn't have to know programming to be able to get this information out. You just had to know your chart of accounts. And most accountants in the organization know their chart of accounts. They know what goes in each account. This does integrate with all of the Microsoft Dynamics ERP solutions. So whether you're with Solomon, you're with Great Plains, or you're with AX, this works with all three of those. Management Reporter is actually made up of a couple different components. You have the report designer, you have a report queue, which is basically the job queue for when you generate reports. After you generate those reports, they will actually go to the viewer. There are two different viewers. One is the report viewer, the desktop viewer, or one is the web viewer. And I'll show you, we'll go through some of that. If you are still on FRX, you can migrate all of your FRX reports over to Management Reporter, and there is a migration wizard for that. That component can be uninstalled after you've actually migrated over and you're now using Management Reporter Live. On the server side, on the SQL database, you'll have two databases. Two if you're using Datamart, only one if you're using the legacy data provider. There are some services. There's two applications, an application and a process service that get installed when you install Management Reporter. All security is actually through Windows authentication, and your output options are actually you would have the ability to export to Excel. You can print your reports, or you can send them to an XPS printer. Now, in addition, with your printing, if you have a PDF printer installed, if you choose to use PDF instead of XPS, you do have that ability as well. I don't want anybody confused thinking you can only use XPS, but if you do have a PDF printer installed, you can export to a PDF file as well. Some of the business benefits of actually using Management Reporter is that you can actually get real-time results without IT assistance. That's probably one of the biggest things, one of the biggest advantages for accountants is being able to do this stuff themselves and not having to rely on their IT staff to actually do this. that you can get custom reports based on your GL data. So if somebody comes up and says, hey, I need you to do an expense analysis on a quarterly basis, a 3-year trend, you know, how quickly you can actually pull out that kind of information and not spend hours and hours and hours trying to generate a report. Huge time saving at the end of the month if you were, and I know this, some of you may think that this is crazy, but I do have clients out there that are still manually creating their financial statements. But this would definitely speed up your month-end reconciliation process, being able to quickly generate the same reports month after month without having to spend hours generating those reports by hand. And then gives you the ability to automate that report distribution if you so choose. So if you wanted to be able to allow users to look at those reports online, you do have that ability to do that. And this is a relatively short implementation cycle. It does not necessarily take forever to actually get this installed. Probably within a couple hours, depending on how many reports you actually want to generate, you could be up and running with your first report. So huge benefits from being able to consistently duplicate reports on a month-to-month basis. Now the key features and functionalities of Management Reporter is that when you're creating reports in Management Reporter, they use it what they call a building block approach. So it essentially will take your reports and it's going to break them apart into what goes down the page and what goes across the page. And you build them independently, and that's where you get the rows, you get the columns, and then you can also get the dimensionality of reporting by using a reporting tree. We'll go through all of this as we go through the product demo. I will show you where all of those parts and pieces come into play. But just keep in mind that when you create a report, you're going to break it apart and you're going to build things independently, so then you can mix and match your building blocks together. And I like to give the analogy of think of your closet. And in your closet you have shirts and you have pants and you mix them together to create your outfits. So if you think of rows kind of like your shirts and columns like your pants, you may create a row that's an income statement and it's got, you know, revenues up here and expenses down here. And then your column has maybe a month of and a year to date in it. But maybe you want to see that exact same report that has a 12-month quarterly trend or a 12-month trend or maybe a 3-year quarterly trend. You can use that same row definition that you've created and pair it with a different column definition to create a different report. So it's like shirts and pants mixing together, right? When you run these reports, when you create these reports, you're going to create them on a dynamic basis so that you choose the date you want to run the report for. I have some people that are still using advanced financials directly out of GP, and that's one of the things where you're limited in being able to actually choose the year that you want to generate a report. It's not super easy. With Management Reporter, whatever data you have in the general ledger, whether it be back from 2002 or if you're working in 2017, you can pull any year for any period and be able to generate a report over and over again. You can choose the level of detail that you actually want to see in the report. So if you want to be able to drill all the way down to a transaction level and see what transactions make up a balance, you have that ability to be able to do that. And then you can choose your output when you actually generate it. Do you want to be able to send this to an Excel file? Do you want to send this to a PDF file? You have those abilities. Okay? So here's an example of a report design that's using a row, a column, and a tree. So you'll notice over here, under the blue section, you've got the row definition. So you'll notice you've got your revenues, and you've got your cost of goods sold, gross margin, operating expenses, all the way down to your net income. And over here you have your month of and year to date. And up here you've got which company you're actually running it for. So over here you can see that this says San Francisco region. This is part of the department, like if you were to create a tree, when I was talking about dimensionality reporting and we were talking about creating an income statement that gave you this year versus last year or month of, year to date, whatever. What trees give you the ability to do is to take your responsibility segments within your organization and run an individualized report for each of those responsibility segments. Now those responsibility segments are the responsibility segments within your chart if you're in a specific company. So that would be like your department, your location, your division, territory, whatever you have your segments set up as. Or if you've got multiple companies, the responsibility segments become the individual companies in your organization. So trees allow you to consolidate or to separate the responsibility segments within your chart. So if you think of that closet analogy, and you've got your shirts and you've got your pants, so you're mixing your rows and your columns together. If you think of trees as the accessory to the report, so trees allow you to say, okay, I want to take that exact same report that I was getting in total company for the month of and year to date, and I want to break it down by my regions, my San Francisco region and maybe my Denver region or whatever, okay? So you've got a row, you've got a column, and then you've got a tree. And when you mix and match all those together, you can make the report do whatever you want. So this is an example where you've got month of and year to date. And then this next slide shows that you get that exact same report, but instead of giving month of and year to date, now you're going to get budget versus actual. Okay, so we're just using a different column definition, the same row definition, to be able to generate a different report. So at this point, I'm just going to start taking you into the product and show you what that looks like. So here we are in Management Reporter. And over here on the side, you'll notice that you have panels just like you do in GP. So if we were to actually open up GP, you've got your panels over here, and you click on them, and it's going to take you to the various different modules that you have installed. Okay? So if we're in Designer, we have report definitions. This will show us our row definitions. This will show us our column definitions. Now, if for any of you that are coming off of FRX, you know, you used to have the 4 boxes in the middle of your screen, and then you would click on the individual box to be able to see what definitions that you actually had to find. They actually call them row formats, column layouts, and trees. Now they're all just end and definition, but they're the exact same thing that they were in FRX. So you have various different rows created, different columns created, and then the combination of those would be in the report definitions that you have created. And then you also have trees down here at the bottom. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open up a report so you can see how all of these get pulled together. Actually, let me quickly show you what a row definition would actually look like. Here's where you're defining, all right, on a balance sheet, I've got my cash, my receivables, my inventory, and then you identify which accounts or account categories that you'd want to include on those individual lines. And then in your column, this is where you're defining, I want my description, I want month of, year to date, and then, oh, when I drill down, maybe I want some transaction information into this. Okay, so when you're on your report, if you click on the drop down here, you can see all the various different rows you have created and all the columns you have created. Then you choose the one that you want. So now it's pairing those together to create our outfit. Okay, so at this point you have a report date selected, or you can choose any month or year that you'd like to run the report for. Your detail level up here allows you to run this report from a financial all the way down to a transaction level. And when you hit generate, this will allow you to see the report in total. And then you'll be able to click on individual rows to be able to see the accounts that make up that balance. Okay, so here's our cash line. And if I double click on this, I can see the 2 accounts that make up that balance. Now I want you to notice the icons up here at the top. We happen to be in the desktop viewer. I'll show you this also in the web viewer. But now you'll notice when I click on individual balances, I have different options that become available in my menu bar. One of those options is the Dynamics button or potentially the drill down button. Now, what I was talking about when we were on the financial level, or when we were on the report distribution, or the report definition here, that you could choose the different detail levels that you'd like to run this report for. This is considered the financial level of a report. When you double click on this, you'll notice I have a drill down option here, or I can just double click. This is considered the account level. If I had run this report and I had said only come to a financial level, I would have only been able to come this far in the report, and I would not have been able to double click on any of these to be able to see the account balances. But because I did choose to run this down to an account level, I do have the ability to double click on this to get to the account level. Now, I did not run this down to a transaction level. I only ran this to an account level. However, and which is why when I click on this, my drill down is not available. However, my Dynamics button is available. So if I click on the Dynamics button, now I do have to have GP open, which I do. You have to have GP open in order to be able to do this. But if you click on your drill down button or your Dynamics button, what it's going to do is it's going to open the detail inquiry screen for the account that you were on. So here's the account I was on. So there's my balance, and I was on the year-to-date column when I clicked on that, so it automatically filled in my dates for me, and it shows me all the transactions that make up that balance. Now I'm in GP, right? I'm in the detail inquiry screen of GP. I can click on any one of these journal entries, and I can drill back all the way back to the source document if I like to be able to see that information. So as you can imagine, this can be a great tool if you are trying to do some analysis on your reports, or maybe something just looks way out of whack, something's really high for the month and you're not exactly sure what it is. You can actually drill all the way down to the transaction level and be able to look at the individual transactions that make up those balances without necessarily having to run this report down to a transaction level. Now if I change this down to a transaction level and I regenerate this, what this is going to give me the ability to do is to get all of that kinds of transaction information directly in my report. So if you're wanting to be able to send these reports out to district managers or something along those lines, and they don't have the ability to actually open up GP, you can still give them the ability to click into an account and see the transaction information directly in your report as well. Okay, so I do still have the ability to click on the Dynamics or the drill down. So I can do either one when I actually include the transaction information in my report. Now, if you don't need to see the transaction information in your report, I usually tell people not to include that information. One, because you do have to have a month of column in your report in order for that to actually even work, because it will only work with a periodic column. But also, if you have a lot of accounts in here and you have a lot of transaction history, you could make your reports take longer to run by including that information. And if you're not really using it with your report, then I wouldn't have you actually include that, so that you're not sitting there waiting for a report to generate that you're not necessarily using that information. Because you do always have the ability to drill back into Dynamics directly without having to generate that into the report. But if people don't have the ability to do that, like I said, for district managers or something along those lines, it is nice that you can provide that information if they need it, especially like if you're doing budget versus actual reporting or something like that, and they need to be able to see what transactions made up that balance as to why they're so off from budgeting. Okay, so your reports allow you to choose where you're going to generate these. Now I also want to show you that you do have two different viewers. This is the desktop viewer. This is probably what you're used to seeing if you're currently working with FRX. And you do have the ability to look at things through the web viewer as well. Now you'll notice that I did not regenerate this report. All I did was change my options down under Tools, Options, and I changed what my default viewer was going to be. So now there's a button right next to the Generate that allows you to click on this, and it will actually open this report the last time you generated it. So it's not regenerating this report, it's just allowing you to open this in a different viewer. And this is the web viewer. You'll notice it's exactly the same. So now I actually have that report open in the desktop viewer and the web viewer at the exact same time. And you do have the ability through the web viewer to drill down into it and still see the account balances. And you'll also notice now that when I click, it gives me the option, do I want to drill to the report transaction level, or do I want to open it in dynamic? So even from the web viewer, you do have both options. So if I click down to a transaction level, I'm still in the web viewer, and it gives me all the transactions that make up that balance for the month. Or it will allow me to open it with that detail level or into the detail inquiry screen, just like we did from the desktop viewer. So you have both options there. One is not necessarily better than the other in terms of viewers. It's just a matter of what do you need to do and what do you have access to. Like most of your end users may not have access to your web viewer. They may only have access to your desktop viewer. So it's nice, or excuse me, vice versa, they only have access to your web viewer. So it's nice that you have the ability to look at things through the web viewer. There's going to be things that you can do in the desktop that you can't do in the web viewer and vice versa. You as an accounting user would have the ability to do both, which is nice because if you're going to send these reports out to your end users and you need to see what they're going to see, you can always open the reports in the web viewer. Down over here in the bottom, you have a bunch of different options that you can use to refresh the report. If you have generate capabilities, you can click on the go to, and this will, if you've got a multiple page report here, this will take you to various sections of the report. Now this is only a one-page report, so that's very unimpressive, but if you had a 2 or 3 page report, it would jump you to the various different sections. If you're using multi-currency, you can switch between your currencies here, so that if you needed to see that in a different currency, you can swap between those. You do have the ability to look at previous reports. So you'll notice here I've got 2 different versions of this report in here. Now they both were run for December because one of them was run where I couldn't drill down to the transaction level. I just ran both of those. So that was one of the other changes from FRX for any of those of you that are coming off, that whenever you generate a report, it's actually going to put a new version of that report in the library. So it's got a versioning system, and if you run the report 5 times in a day, it's going to put all 5 copies of that report in the library. And you have the ability to go back and look at those previous versions of those reports by just clicking the show button here and then clicking on previous reports. Now you can do right clicks and say open in a new tab. You know, so then you can have 2 different versions open at the same time if you needed. Now this would probably make a little bit more sense if you had various months in here and you were trying to comparisons, but now these are in separate tabs. You can just move these tabs around if you want. If you had 2 monitors, you could throw one on one monitor and one on the other monitor. But it allows you to do a little bit more analysis, you know, on the screen, makes things a little easier, so that can be really nice. If you're on the latest version of Management Reporter, you do now have the print capability. For anybody that was on a lower version of Management Reporter, the printing wasn't as nice out of the web viewer. Printing usually I would have suggested people do that out of the desktop version, because then your printing would be a little bit more board quality versus looking like you printed it from a web page. But now you have that ability here to do some of that. If you're in the web viewer and you need to go back to the desktop viewer, no worries. You can actually click on the download button and it allows you to actually open the report back in the desktop viewer. So you can toggle back and forth. So if you just can't get something to print correctly out of the web viewer or whatever, you can always throw it back into the desktop viewer and then you can print from here. You can actually export these things to Excel. So if you hit the Excel button up here, you can choose to export it. You can choose where you want to save the file that you're exporting. And it'll allow you to open it in Excel, and it'll essentially take that information and send it down to Excel. Now, I only sent the financial level, but if I come back over here into my report and I export, I can actually choose to send all of the detail levels. Let me go close that one so I can reopen it. So what's going to happen when you export this to Excel is you can actually take you'll get 3 tabs, one for the financial level, one for the account level, and one for the transaction level. Okay, so you'll notice there's an F, an A, and a T version now. So this is the financial level. This would be considered the account level, and now you can see each of the accounts that make up each of the individual lines. And then if we go down to a transaction level, these are all the transactions that make up that balance for each of the accounts, provided they had transactions for that month, because remember, this is just a month of column. So this can be very, very handy if you need to be able to give information to an auditor, so if they need to be able to look at things. So think about if you needed to be able to give like a trial balance kind of information. You can do a trial balance out of Management Reporter, and you can have it go all the way down to a transaction level. So it essentially becomes very, very similar to like a detailed general ledger report that you would print. But now you have the ability to export it to Excel and have it be different levels, you know, the financial, the account, and the summary level. So if we come back over here and I actually run a trial balance, okay, so this is just a quick one where it gave your assets, your liabilities, and your revenue. Actually, what did I run this one as? Let's run this all the way down to a transaction level. Let's rerun this one, and we'll open it up in the desktop version. Somehow I don't think I'm going to have any transactions for period 3 of 2017. We'll see what the demo company actually has. All right, so this would be considered the financial level. When you drill this in, this is going to be considered the account level, and then when you drill in this farther, this is considered the detail level. So if we're back over here on the financial page, I can export this to Excel, and I can say I want to export all those pieces. So when this exports, I'm actually going to get 3 tabs. Okay, so here's my financial level that just gives me a total summary of my assets. Now here's breaking down all my assets. So here's all my individual assets. Here's all my individual liabilities. Here's my revenue. So this would be the account level. So you could put whatever columns you want going across. And here would be considered your transaction level. Let's actually change our view so you can actually see this a little better. Okay, so now it's giving me all my transactions. Now you might be thinking, wow, that's not very pretty. It's not, you know, showing it to me like my detailed general ledger report. Well, you can control that in your columns. So if you wanted to, you can create these ATTR columns that allow you to pull any of the transaction items or, you know, the attributes of a journal entry. So you can put whatever attributes you want going across the page and put them in whatever order. So if you wanted to have, let's say, the transaction description, and then maybe you want the journal entry, and then maybe you want the document number, and maybe you want to see the vendor or the customer ID, and maybe you want to see their actual name, you know, and whatever periods you have going across over here, if you were to then generate this, you'd be able to see that kind of information going across the page. So I'll drill down into that so you can see that. So you can make your columns look any way you want and have any information in any column, as long as it originates from a journal entry or an account. So if we drill into this a little further here, okay, so now you can see here's, I think this was my transaction, this is my journal entry number, this was my originating document number, these are my customers or vendors, and then the IDs, and then this was their name. So you can spell that out however you want, but now when you export this information to Excel, and I'm only doing the financial level at this point. Oops, I have that file open, so let me close it real quick. It's going to put that information into their own individual columns, so it's going to make it easier if you need to start separating things or sorting things to look at. Now I only did one count at a time, but you get the idea of being able to have that be in separate columns and versus trying to export a CVS file and then having somebody import, trying to import it and open it. And doesn't make for a pretty report. Okay, so now that you've got all your reports created, it does give you the ability to actually create report groups. And this allows you to essentially run multiple reports at the same time. Now I've already generated this, so I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me generate a report, but what it's going to do is it's going to open up your report in a web viewer, and it's going to give you a link back to the 2 reports that were included in your report group. So in my report group I had a balance sheet and I had an income statement. You can put as many reports in here as you want. You can choose the time frame that you want to run all of these reports for. You can choose the detail level that you want to run the reports for. If you don't override the individual reports, all the reports will run by the detail level you have associated. If you don't override it, it's going to run based on the individual report and choose to run it individually. Okay, so when this generates, like I said, it's going to open up a group distribution page and it has a link back to each of these reports. So now I can either do a right click and say open it in a new tab, or I can just click on it and it opens it in the current one, and I can use the back button to go back. So now I can have both of these reports open at the same time. Okay, so here's an example of a balance sheet, and here's my income statement that I ran as part of my weekly reports, or you could call this monthly reports, whatever you want to call your group. Now from this little drop page, whatever, from this group distribution page, you do have the ability to download these reports as well. So you have the ability to download them to an XPS viewer or to an Excel file. So this essentially will allow you to print both these reports at the same time. So if I click on XPS viewer, it's going to open this up and give you the ability to print both those pages. Okay, so here's my balance sheet, and then there's my income statement. And then from here I can either print this or I can save this to a file, whatever. Now if I decide I want to send this to Excel, it's going to put all the reports that were in that report group into a single Excel workbook, and every tab will represent a different page, will represent a different report. Okay, so here's my balance sheet and here's my income statement. Okay, now you'll notice that both of those just say F, because when this was generated, we only said to go to the financial level. If I had said go to the account level and regenerate this, then when you generate it, it's going to allow you to drill into the report, and when you export this to Excel, you'll get 4 tabs, 2 for the balance sheet and 2 for the income statement, one that each that represents it as a financial, and one that for each that will represent it as an account level. You'll notice that as I'm running this report group, it's running all 3, well, 2 of those reports, and it's creating my report group all at the same time. Okay, so here's a new version of my report. So if I click on my balance sheet, okay, I can drill into my account and get down to an account level. Okay, so if I come back over here, I just want to show you now when I export this to Excel. And I open it. Now I get the financial level of my balance sheet, and then here's the account level of my balance sheet. Okay, so there's my cash, my account, and the same thing with my income statement. There's the financial level, and then that's the account level. And actually, I think this one was running with a tree. So let's go back and look at that real quick and see how you can drill into that a little bit differently. I got a bunch of stuff. Let me close a bunch of stuff so I'm not confusing you guys. All right, so if I open my income statement here, I think my income statement, nope, is not using a tree. Let's go back into, I'm running my income statement detail report, so I'm going to come back over here to my report definitions, and I'm going to open up my income statement detail report because I want to open that independently from my group. Oh, it's not using a tree. Let me show you something that's using a tree so you can see how that actually comes into play. This is an example of an income statement detail. So if I click on the row here, you can see all the individual sales accounts are listed. I've got my cost of goods sold, and I've got my expense accounts down here. You can see these are 6 accounts, these are 7 accounts. Okay? And I'm using a tree that's going to break out my various different departments. I got Department 1, Department 2, Department 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way through 99. Okay, so when you generate this report, you can see over here I've got my summary of all units. This is a total of the whole company. And now when I click on Department 2, I'm going to see just the accounts that are associated Department 2, and I have just the accounts that are associated Department 5 or just Department 9. And you can see my headers changing as well. So by being able to create a row in a column that has the main account in it and my tree that has the departments segregated out, now I can run a report, and instead of just getting a summary of everything, now I can get one for each of the departments as well. Okay, so let me back up and show you that a little more slowly, because I know I tend to talk really fast and people have accused me of clicking fast as well. You're choosing which row you want to use, and you'll notice that when we create the row, we're really only using the main account. Okay? Coming back over in the column, I'm basically just telling it that I want to do a month of column and a year-to-date column, and I'm going to actually pull some budget information in here as well. Okay? And then in my tree, I'm using my departments. So now what's going to happen is it's going to tie Department 01 with the main account, and it's going to say, okay, just pull me the department of the accounts that have this department as that segment. So that when you then generate the report, you get something like this. You get something that's the summary of everything, but then you can still break it down into the individual departments. You can see I've got my month of, I have my year to date, I have my budget, and then I have my remaining budget. But I could run this exact same report, and instead of having month of, year to date with budget, I could come over to my report here, and instead of using the column that gives me my month of and my year to date and my budget, I could swap this column out for something that gives me a rolling quarter. So here's an example where it's going to say, all right, give me period 1. Well, actually, let's not do that one. That one's a little confusing. Let's do a trend, a 12-month trend. So if we look at this one, it's going to give me period 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through 12. Okay, so just by swapping out the pants, I can regenerate this and choose to run it for all departments, or I could choose to run it for individual departments. Okay, so now I have that exact same report, but instead of seeing just month of and year to date, now I can see January, February, March, all the way across. And I'm still getting a summary of all units. So here's the summary, here's Department 1, here's Department 2. It's going to only give me the departments for the time frame that I have information for. Okay, so basically what I was trying to show you there was that you could have the same report that's using, you could have a report that uses the same row, and you just swap out the column and maybe even swap out the tree, and you end up with different results. But you build them independently, and then if you already have those things created, it's just like walking into your closet. And if you're in your closet, you have a red shirt and you have black pants and you have gray pants, you can create 2 different outfits, one that uses the red pants, or excuse me, the red shirt with the black pants and the red shirt with the gray pants. Or if you have a red shirt, a green shirt, and a purple shirt, you can tie any of those shirts to the black pants. So when you're looking at your reports, you just have to determine, what do I have going across the page? You build that independently, and then you only have to build it once. And then you look at your reports and say, okay, well, this is what I have going down the page, and I need 4 reports that have the same kind of income statement information going down the page, but I need to be able to see it this year versus last year. I need to see it as a quarterly. I need to be able to see, maybe you want to see departments side by side on a report. Those all can use the same row. You just set up your columns differently, and you mix and match all of your parts and pieces together to get the reports that you're actually looking for. So it can take you actually less time to create your reports because you only have to build the parts once. You're not building the entire report every single time you need a different report. All right, you can schedule reports. I honestly probably don't have anybody that actually uses this, but you do have the ability that if you wanted to schedule individual reports or report groups, that you can choose to run them at whatever frequency. So this works just like if you were setting up a recurring appointment in Outlook or something along those lines. All of this works exactly the same way. And then you just save the schedule, and any report that's either the individual report or any report that's in the report group will run on that schedule. So it's not hard to set up. It's just I have found that people, once they have the report groups created, that's probably good enough because it allows them to generate all the reports at the same time, and they don't necessarily need to schedule things. But if you need to be able to schedule it at 3 o'clock in the morning so that when you get in the morning at 8 o'clock, all your reports are up and refreshed for the day, you can definitely do that. Security is handled through your Active Directory. So any user that you'd want to be able to use the webinar or the web piece, you would have to give them rights within Management Reporter to be able to get into Manage My Reporter, because when you generate a report, we come back over here into our report viewer, you'll notice that we have a library over here. And all our reports are in this library. So whenever you generate a report, it is not putting a copy of the report on your desktop or in a network share or anything like that. It's actually putting a copy of the report in the Manage My Reporter database. So when you generate this, every time you generate this, it's putting a new copy on top of the old copy. And we could talk about different kinds of, this is a different webinar, but you could talk about creating different folder structures in here if you wanted to. And maybe you have years created. And maybe you have folders created to put the various periods in. So when you generate your reports, you can actually put them in various folders, whatever. And you can actually move copies of reports to various folders if you want to. And then you have to secure, you can secure this. You don't have to. It is already secure. You have to grant people permission to these folders, and you would grant permission to the users that are already created over here on the designer side when you set up your new users. So in the library, you can assign users to be able to access various different folders. So if you have multiple companies and only certain people can see certain reports or whatever, you can either do things on an individual report basis. If you come in here and you look at permissions, you can do things on an individual report basis or on folder basis. You would add your users and grant them the appropriate permissions so that if you send somebody a link to look at a report, they'd be able to open it. So that is one of the options, that you can actually email a link to somebody to be able to open this report. So this is what your email would end up looking like. It would put a link into your report, then you can send it to whoever you want, and if they click on the link, it will actually open it in a web viewer. However, if you have not set them up as a user within Manage My Reporter, then they would not be able to open this report and they would get an error. So it is secure. All right, I think I've been talking a mile a minute here. At this point, let's open it up. And does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Annette. Yeah, we actually did receive a few questions throughout your presentation. The first question that we got, in Web Viewer, do I need to set up a user in Great Plains for them to view it?
Not in Great Plains. You would have to set them up as a user in security in order for them to be able to open the report, just like I did here. They don't have to be a user in Great Plains, but they would not have the ability to drill back into GP and do, that detail inquiry screen if they didn't have a GP user. So they'd be able to look at things in a web viewer as long as you set them up as a user in MR, but they wouldn't be able to drill back to GP if they don't have a GP license and they don't have a user ID that allows them to get into GP. Hopefully that answered that question.
Great, thanks. The next question, for the report that had the month and year-to-date columns, you had gone in and added the attribute columns for the account details. Are you able to do this report with multiple months and get all of the details for each month?
Yes. So if you had a column that was opened up like this, well, that's a single rolling. And this is a good example though. So you could do this one of two ways. This is considered a periodic column, even though this is going to give me 12 months of information all in one column. Now this is a dynamic column, so it is working off of your base report date. So if your base report date, if you chose to run this report for December, base is 12, that is the equivalent of saying 1:12. Okay? If you ran this for period 11, this essentially would be 11, this would probably be minus 2. So this would cross over your fiscal years. Okay, so this column will always give you 12 months of information. Okay, so it will cross over years if like say you run it for period 6 and you're on a calendar year, and period 6 is June, it's going to give you July of the previous year all the way through June of the current year if you do this. But because this is a periodic column, you would get all the transactions, if you ran this down to a transaction level, all the transactions for all 12 of those months. Okay, so this kind of thing, or if you did something like this, where you said FD and you left that and you said 1:base, okay, and you ran this for period 6, this would be 1:6. If you ran this for period 7, this would say 1:7, or yeah, 1:7. So you'd still get essentially a year-to-date column in a periodic, but keep in mind it would be current year activity only. So if you were trying to do anything with balance sheet, you would not get your beginning balances in a column like this. If you were to do a column that looked like this, 1:base periodic versus base YTD, on a P&L, this would give you exactly the same thing. On a balance sheet, you would get current year activity only here. You would not get your 1/1 balances in this. Okay, but this would be how you'd be able to still be able to get multiple periods if you only had a year-to-date column and you want to go down to a transaction level. Otherwise, you could still open up like if you had your column, that 12-month periodic trend column where we had each of the individual, you could still come over here and add a bunch of ATTR columns across, and then all of your information would be in its own individual column. So hopefully that answers that question, and I think I went a little further than maybe what you were originally asked, but do we have any other questions?
Yes, I have another question. How do we delete reports from FRX before or after migration?
Well, in FRX or in Management Reporter, are you looking to delete the reports? In FRX, you would just have to open up the catalog, and depending on what version, if you were on, Service Pack 9, 11, 10, or 12, this might be a little bit different, but there's just a delete option. So, you can just delete the report. You may have to run a compact on your spec set first in FRX if you're having difficulty deleting things, because there might be some locks that need to be cleared up. But in Management Reporter, if you don't clear anything up in FRX and you just bring everything over in a Management Reporter, let me just close all this stuff so we can get back over here. All right, just say close all. Okay, so as long as you don't have anything open and you want to delete a report, you can just do a right click and hit delete, and it will delete the reports in your report definition. But if you're in FRX, there should be a delete option on your menu to be able to delete it, or if you have the box open and you're in SP12, there should be a delete option when you're on the catalog tab. Hopefully that answered that question.
Great, and we have time for one more question. For all the other questions that we received, we'll definitely follow up with you guys via email after this webinar, but just for time purpose, we'll do one more. You showed a quick side-by-side balance sheet. Is there a way to format that so the asset side lines up with the liability side, and so the bottom rows line up on both sides?
Yeah, you kind of have to play with the row definition. That's really the only way to do that. So when you're setting up your row definition, and I'll just pull up that balance sheet real quick here. Did I pull up the right one? I don't think this is the one that we were using. It might have been this one. Anyway, so let's say you want to, here's the end of your assets and here's your liabilities, and you want this line to line up with this line. You may have to do a little bit of playing here, and obviously we have less rows here than we have the way liabilities and equity are all played out. So you'd probably have to add some extra lines in here to make them, but it's not going to do it by default. You have to play with and insert extra rows. So when you want to actually be able to do that where you have the side-by-side going on, that's one of the format codes here. So if you insert a row, you can actually insert, when you say use the column format code, it forces everything below that to be right next to the original. So if you have the demo reports, I believe, did I do this in the ratios? Oh, you could play with it on this report if you want. And I just came in here and I just put column between all of those and then run the report, and you can see it'll put all of these ratios side by side rather than stacking them on top of each other. So hopefully that answered that question.
Great. Well, thank you, Annette, for your awesome presentation today on Management Reporter. If people have other questions that come up later, feel free to reach out to myself, Annette, or your account executive if you'd like to learn more about anything that you learned today in today's presentation. So on behalf of everyone at Enterdyne PMI, we'd like to thank you for your attendance and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, guys.